So you want to be an architect. If you're wondering if architecture is the right path for you, you've stumbled onto the right place. In episode 1, we discuss what to do if you're in high school and how to select the appropriate college. In this video, we will discuss what to do to become licensed from here. Last week, we talked about how to become an architect from the high school and college points. This video will talk about licensing once you graduate college. What is the process? There are 4 portions to getting your license. The first one is education. The second is your experience, or what's called IDP. The third is your examination. Experience and examination can be done at the same time in most states. There are some requirements depending on your education levels that affect when you can start your examination. Finally, after you have all those pieces and components together, you can apply for your license. There are several paths of education that will allow you to get your license depending on the state. There's an accredited architecture degree, which usually requires, for New York State, 3 years of experience in a architecture firm afterwards. There's non-accredited architecture degree, and usually it's a 4-year program, and then you're required to get 5 years of experience in the field. And that's rough. It depends on the state. I did my licensing in New York, so a lot of my information comes from my experiences in New York State. The other one is non-accredited, non-architecture degree, and it requires more time in the field to get licensed. And then finally, of course, if you don't have any experience, some states allow you to get licensed after 12 or 13 years in the field without any kind of architecture or non-architecture degree. The other one is called ESSA evaluation. So if you got a degree, maybe an architecture program or non-architecture program in another country, you can apply for evaluation for comparison to an architecture degree in the US or Canada. And if you get approved through that process, you can start your licensing as well. I'll provide a link to this page below. But if you want to know the specific licensing requirements based on your state, NCARB has the licensing requirements tool. In this tool, you can scroll about initial registration, your reciprocal registration, renewal, and practice requirements. Typically, this only really matters for initial registration and potentially reciprocal registration. So you would, there's a bunch of list of requirements for you to understand. The applicant is required to be a resident. An interview is required for initial registration. An online application is available. What kind of degree or experience you're required to have. What the requirements are for your IDP, AXP. And then if you're available to... Typically, only if you're NAB accredited are you available to start your AREs before you meet your experience requirements. That's for New York State. Again, everything is variable based on where you are. So this is a bunch of list of requirements, and they're not everything. So I always suggest that you go on to your actual state. I am in New York, so we're going to review that one first. And you can get additional experience as accepted. So you can get an alternate education path in the state of New York. An architectural degree is accepted from a Canadian university. You are required to complete AXP, but additional hours are required. So for New York State, you're required to have 3 years experience in a licensed architecture office that is an LLP in full service. That's on top of the amount of time for your AXP IDP. It took me about 3.5 years to get my IDP, so by the time I had that completed, I already had all my experience hours in. ARE, this is standard for all states. You're going to have to require to complete the ARE. In some states, you can take your AREs as soon as you graduate from your school program. Typically, this is set aside for NAB accredited degrees, but different states are different. So if you click here, we can look at another state. Let's look at Texas. So you can apply online. There you cannot have additional alternative education. They require you to have an NAB accredited degree. but a Canadian degree is allowed, and if you have an architecture degree in another country, it's allowed. You just have to complete AXP. There's nothing beyond those requirements for accepting. But you can do a portfolio for AXP, which is interesting for not allowing additional experience acceptance. And then all this other stuff is pretty basic. So if we look now at one more state, let's look at California, because I'm sure there's a lot of people there. They allow alternate education. There are nothing additional beyond IDP in your exams. I'm going to use New York State as an example because this is where I got licensed. They require 12 credits combined from your education and your experience. I got the NAB accredited degree, which was 9 units, so I only needed 3 more units after I graduated to get my license. Based on their state requirements, 2 of those years minimum must be under a fully practicing architecture firm listed as an LLP, and then there's a few other ones that you are allowed to work for. In New York State, one of the things that becomes an issue is if you work for the government, they are not full service, so you cannot get licensed going straight to the government. You can have a lot of your other requirements from firms that practice other parts of architecture, a construction firm, a consulting firm, anything else that might serve architecture but doesn't actually produce architectural documents, construction, and all of the processes you need to experience to get licensed. There are other ways to get your experience requirements, though. You can have a NAB accredited degree, a non-NAB accredited degree, which gives you 8 units, a pre-professional degree with 2 years in an accredited program that you didn't finish, which is 7 units, a degree in architecturally related construction management is one of these, and that would be 5 units. And then if you get a non-architectural degree with a post-architecture degree, like a master's in architecture, it would count as 2 units. The next part of getting your license is your experience, which is called the AXP program. You have to get a certain amount of hours in each category of experience. So the first one is practice management. The second is project management. The third is programming and analysis. The fourth is project planning and design. The fifth is project development and documentation. And the sixth is construction evaluation. And we will go through each one and explain in more detail what the different categories represent. The first topic is practice management. This is everything you do inside the firm to manage the firm, and includes different things like marketing, actually doing the books and understanding how to apply for projects, doing program reports, communications with clients. So some of the things you can do it here is understanding the professional context of how an architect operates, working on proposals, putting together some of the regulations and laws for documentation that you sign with the client or the contractors. So there's a bunch of lists of different things here of the different standards of what you need to do. This one was the hardest one to get time in, mainly because when you're beginning, you do a lot of detailing and red lines. But it's very valuable to understand how your business works and how you get clients, hold clients, and protect yourself legally. The second category is project management. This is very important for how you go through a project and what you do to make sure that you meet the guidelines, requirements, the budget for a project. You typically don't do this until you've been in the field for a few years, but if you ask nicely, usually your project manager will let you help or assist in some ways. Some of the skills is participating in pre-construction meetings, also doing budget work or understanding how you work with consultants and coordinating with consultants. That's the easiest way I found to get this experience, was talking to consultants and understanding what they need from me and answering questions and coordinating ceiling plans. The The best thing also is learning how to talk to contractors about how to put together a project schedule. Understand how many square feet can a contractor paint, or how long it takes to install the rigid insulation board. Understanding those things and putting together preliminary schedules for the client can be very helpful. Also, coordinating design work. We had in-house consultants and architects and engineers, so we would design and have meetings discussing how different things went together. Some of the other things are more technical documents that you put together with clients and consultants and vendors, and understanding how to do stuff through construction, and figuring out what the client needs in terms of requirements for the project. Do they want construction fees included in the design, or do they only want design? Do you have to do a bid report? Do you not? Do you need to do programming with them? What services are they asking you to provide? Other things are providing sketches of design to the client to help them select what they need for the project, because they don't necessarily always need or know what they need to know. They rely on us to guide them through the design process. The third one is programming analysis. This was always my favorite thing to do when I was younger. And I also still do it now, just not as much. I do more of the project management, like we talked about beforehand, and a lot of coordinating bid documents and construction documents and vendor and consultant coordination. For programming analysis, we focus on how you determine what the zoning requirements are, how you determine what the community will or will not have. I had a project that wanted to be a farm-to-table restaurant in a residential area, and the residents did not want a farm there. So I had to go and meet with the board and talk about why this would benefit them, how the noise would not affect them, and pretty much answer any questions they had in order to push the project forward. A lot of times you might have to go on site and see what you're looking at. Maybe there's ground conditions you have to do some surveying. Maybe you have an existing building and you need to take dimensions and figure out what's actually built compared to drawings you may or may not have. You may also look at the different types of sustainability or design goals and figure out the programming for a space and make sure that a program can fit in an existing building, which is my favorite because that's a puzzle. And whenever you get to solve a puzzle and try to figure out how to make all the spaces work and what you can or can't do and how you can do certain things, it's a lot of fun. I could eat a lot of time on that topic. And then just understanding what a conceptual budget is for the project. And this stage, you don't have a building, you have a rough idea. So what can they roughly expect this project to cost them so that they can plan the stages of funding it? And helping them understand how to fund it can also be in this. Understanding what the constraints are for the space. Maybe the client picked a site, but that site cannot be used for an office building and it can only be residential neighborhood. Then what do you need to do to get the zoning changed on that property? Or maybe you select a different property. And then this is one of my favorite things. This is a good topic. It's a lot of the stuff I think you deal with in school. It's the most relatable to what you do while you're studying. The fourth category is project planning and design. This is the early stages of a project. After you've done the programming and the analysis, you move on to understanding how the building goes together, and get a final layout of the building, understand what things you might need to research to further design the building. You can understand how you're affecting the exterior wall, what the different relationships. You'll do a code analysis and understand what you need to make sure that the building is safe and functional for people. This is also one of the higher categories that you need to get a lot of hours in. The last one also is construction documentation. That's where you need the most. So in this one, you will perform a building code analysis. This is one of the toughest things to do as an architect. The code is very complicated and sometimes can be interpreted in multiple ways. And you have to really spend time in the code understanding how things go together. You also need to understand how you might communicate to a client if a building is not acceptable. I actually had a project where we had to tell the client that this building could not work for their needs, and that the only way they could do it is if they demolished it. But of course they didn't own it, and it was going to be a lease agreement, which meant that wasn't not a valuable approach. And then some of the other things is just understanding what the materials will need to go in the building, maybe what systems are there existing, where the structure is, what you're going to invade, and how you maintain structure, and if your roof slope is appropriate, and if you need more insulation, or what your code, or what the requirements are to keep the building protected from the outside, and keep water out of the building. Understanding what kind of glazing you want, which is just the glass or anything that is transparent in the building. You need to understand what's the difference between different materials. A lot of times the client might think it's too big and they'll want to see what other options there are. Do you go with an EIFS system? Do you go with brick veneer? Do you put glazing in? Do you take glazing out? Do you do metal stud, or do you do wood stud, or do you do steel? Maybe you do prefabricated building. All this stuff comes into play at this stage when you're trying to understand what that final budget is and what those requirements are. And then you will prepare, all the stuff for landscape. How do you make sure that people can safely get into the building per the accessibility guidelines? And you will design how everything will function to make sure that the building going forward has the appropriate egress ways, the appropriate rated wall assemblies for escape, that the building won't come down or kill anyone if a fire or an accident was to occur. There are earthquake codes to make sure that a new building does not collapse, or is less likely to collapse. It's really hard to determine the actual probability, but we have calculations to give us the best case scenario. I will note on one thing for this. I am designing an online course for the future release that will discuss how to perform a building code analysis. How do you document that analysis, and then how do you present it to the client in a way that they understand what needs to happen in a building to make sure it's safe and sustainable, especially in a case where a building cannot be used. So look forward to that in the future. The fifth topic is the other side of project planning and development. This is project development and documentation. After you've done the schematic design, after you understand what the building systems are, after you understand what the code implications of your design are, you can start to bring forward the documents to construction documentations, which is what gets bid. So in this phase, it is about understanding the little details that make the building go together and how you provide those details on a document through the drawings and specifications, and what components go together and how they go together. And this is where you actually detail, okay, this is where the flashing needs to go in relation to the insulation and the window assembly. These are how all the components go together. This is where you select the actual materials that you go, the integral details of how a design goes together. This is when you talk to the client and understand what the actual final building design is. This is when you provide them the documents that they will take to bid. And the specifications. What goes into that wall assembly? What kind of brick ties do you want to have? What kind of bricks do you have? What do those bricks look like? How is the spacing? Are they extra long bricks? Are they extra tall bricks? Is there a brick pattern that you need to communicate? These are all the things that go into this phase of design. The last category is construction and evaluation. This is everything you do through bid results coming back and through construction. So this requires reviewing the bids and understanding why one bid might be low and one bid might be high. and making a recommendation to the client of whether or not they should accept the bid. This is putting out addenda for the bid of any questions the contractors might have, or even going to construction meetings and understanding what's going on in the site and where they are and what the process is. It's reviewing the shop drawings and submittals related to the specifications and drawings that ensure that the requirements of the project are being met. This is going out and reviewing conditions to make sure they're being built appropriately and that they match what we have designed. It is going through and doing punch lists and noting to the client and the contractor when there's something wrong. I've had a few conditions where we've had to remove or replace or relocate exit signs because they weren't visible or they led to an area that would be illegal. And we had to figure out on site how to make those conditions work. A lot of times there's problem solving here because, especially in existing buildings, when you open up a wall, you might not know what's behind that wall. Then all of a sudden you have to figure out how do we resolve this condition to make the building match what we need it to match. And it might be shifting a door 5 feet. It might be not being able to put something here and figuring out where it needs to go to work. This is when you get a lot to the making the building reflect what we need it to be and what the client is now expecting. This is reviewing payment applications. So a contractor will submit to you a documentation saying, okay, I performed this, this, and this, and it's about this percentage of this portion of the project, and this is the fees we're expecting, and then you have to approve it, and then they get paid that portion of the work. And sometimes it's done weekly, sometimes it's done monthly. It all kinds of depends on the client and how they do it. And understanding where they should be based on against what they're saying. As stated previously, there are hour requirements that you need to meet in order to finish your documentation of this area. In total, you're going to need 3,740 hours, which roughly equates to about 3 years of time. Give or take, it usually takes a lot longer because you'll find out you might get to 3,000 hours of project development before you ever get to do any time in project management. So it's all of a balance. It took me about 4 years, 3.5 years to get all of this experience together. And that was with me being forward with my supervisors and my managers saying, hey, this is what I want. This is important to me. If there's any opportunity that I can help, please let me know. I will do it. I've also taken off a day to go on a site with a project manager where they didn't have the money to have me attend the meeting with them, but I was allowed to attend as long as it was on my own time. So sometimes you might be able to find that as a way to get that experience that you need to be able to get through this portion of your experience. One thing I will note on this is, as in comparison when I talked earlier about experience and education as a portion for New York State, that experience for New York State is separate from this experience requirement. That is just time in a field, and it's done from January 1st to January 1st, or whatever that time frame is you worked at the job. They just want to see time hours in a field. So when you're doing that experience for the state, they don't care about 60 hours a week and you getting it condensed. They only care about the physical time at a job, as like I worked at this firm for 3 years, whereas AXP, if you do 60 hours a week, you can knock down the requirements a lot quicker. Hence why some people can get it done quicker if they work for 6 months to 60 hours a week. They've lost 2 or 3 months of time, or they've gained 2 or 3 months of time in that frame towards their hour requirements. So that's one thing, is be very specific when you're looking at the requirements and understand what you can or can't do to get that time. One of the last components after you get your experience, or while you're getting your experience even, is to start your examinations. And they roughly match up with the experience fields. Then I always suggest that you start off with practice management or project management because they are the ones that are the easiest to study for, and getting a quick win under your belt helps propel you forward. The two most complicated exams are project planning and design and project development and documentation. They're very big. They include a large category of material selection, cost estimation, coordination with MEP and structural and acoustics and manufacturers and vendors, and how all of that stuff goes together and how you form the construction documentation. So they're the largest chunk of time. The next are the two, the programming analysis and construction evaluation, which should go roughly in the middle. But I would suggest that if you do the smaller quick wins first to build up and get experience of practicing, you will get there. And of course, ask questions to this channel. I am here to help you. I've been through this. I help design questions for the ArchiPrep program, study program. So I understand what you need to understand to be successful in these exams. So please do submit your questions to me. I am happy to help. I hope you like this, and I really hope it's helped you understand what you need to do to become licensed. If you like this content, please subscribe below, and I am more than happy to help you through this. If you have any more specific questions on this topic and how to get licensed, or tips or advice for how to find a mentor, and definitely make sure your mentor is separate from your supervisor, or the one that signs off on your credits. You should have someone that signs off on your experience, and you should have a mentor that is separate from that. That's the best thing you can do, and it's also suggested by the AIA. I hope this video series helped you determine if this is the right path for you. If you like architecture, you have questions, you're not sure where to go, send me an email, write a comment below, and in my next one of my videos, I will answer your questions. Subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.